From furnace to palace. Welcome to the burning furnace where the three valiant Hebrews walked. Wow! Are you experiencing the cold of winter? I remember when I visited the Museum of the Inquisition in the Castle of St. George, Sevilla, Spain. The pastor who invited me to give a seminar on the Gospel of the Sanctuary was told there was a man there who did research on the work of the Inquisition. We met that man, and he showed us a map that he found in the archives of the city, the walls and buildings, and the place where the presumed heretics were burned. They had to walk from the castle where the Inquisition operated for nearly 2 miles to the place of torment. In one of the documents, I read the testimony from that time regarding a woman who had to walk that route in winter with other supposed heretics, complaining of the pain from bones broken during the torture sessions and feeling cold from the weather. An official was pushing her along as he told her not to worry because she would soon be warm enough from the flames at the stake. When we read the testimony of Daniel about a similar portrayal of cruelty that took place 2,500 years ago, we ask ourselves why the king of Babylon summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. Daniel 3, verses 2 and 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were also summoned by the king, because after the interpretation of the dream given by Daniel, the king had placed them as administrators over the province of Babylon, Daniel 2:49. But he did not summon Daniel, who served the king in his own court, perhaps because it was he who had revealed to the king that in the statue of empires, only the head that represented Nebuchadnezzar was of gold. With this, Daniel had let him know that his kingdom would not last forever. It would be succeeded by other kingdoms. Again, what would have been the purpose of raising a golden image as imposing as the one Nebuchadnezzar commanded to raise, so as to require the ruling class to prostrate themselves before that image? The background of that order seems clear. The kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar would be replaced by another kingdom, and some of the king's opponents would have wanted to hasten the change. In defiance of his dream, the king wanted to make it known that his kingdom would in fact endure forever. He also wanted to expose anyone who might disagree with that interpretation of the future and thereby pose a threat to his position as king. Therefore, he erected a statue entirely of gold. Although such a project by a human being may now seem ridiculous, it is what we see in the history of the great emperors who required that they be treated as if they were gods. Some Roman emperors set their statues next to those of the gods. And even in the popes that succeeded the Caesars of Rome, we see pronouncements and procedures that place them on the same level as God himself. For example, the triple crown of the popes made them virtually king of heaven, king of the earth, and king of the underground worlds. Many understand that it was used to prove that no one could escape them in heaven or hell. The very titles of the popes, as Vicar of God and Vicar of Christ, were blasphemous titles. The Chronicles of Nebuchadnezzar show that this 43-year-old kingdom was rocked by a revolt that occurred in the 10th year of his reign. The revolution apparently came from the army and was suppressed. The prophet Jeremiah recounts that King Zedekiah of Judah went to Babylon in the 4th year of his reign shortly thereafter, in the same year of the rebellion. Since Zedekiah had been established as king 4 years earlier, it is reasonable to infer that he was summoned by Nebuchadnezzar to prove allegiance to his kingdom. But the effect of such a ceremony was negative, because when he returned, King Zedekiah gathered the neighboring kings of Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre, and Sidon to plot an uprising against the king of Babylon. You find the story in Jeremiah 27:28. This is understandable because the oath of allegiance required by Nebuchadnezzar was shaken by the testimony of the 3 brave Jews who did not bow before his statue. A Babylonian clay prism was found that is currently in the Istanbul Museum, containing the names of the officers of the Kingdom of Babylon whom the king established or re-established in his posts. In the list of foreign officers and kings who were summoned, a Seventh-day Adventist Assyriologist, William Shea, was able to distinguish the names of the 3 Jewish males who were summoned to the plain of Dura. It is striking that one of the 3 names, Ananiah, which is linked to the God of Israel, seemed to prevail over the new name he had been given in the court of Babylon. In the confrontation of names related to different gods, the testimony of Ananiah, whose name was related to Yahweh, the God of Israel, prevailed. As a good Jew, Ananiah appears on the prints as head of the royal merchants. The other name that catches the eye is that of Ardi Nebo. The term Ardi in Akkadian is Ebed in Hebrew and means servant of Nebo, the Babylonian god. If the Hebrew text renders it Nego in the Bible, it could be because the biblical writer intentionally altered it to avoid its connection to the Babylonian god Nebo. Ardi Nebo appears on the list of the clay prince as secretary of Prince Amel Marduk, the evil Merodach of 2 Kings 25 verses 27 and 28. It is not surprising in this context that when this prince became king, he immediately took King Jehoiachin of Judah from prison and treated him benevolently, making him sit at his table for the rest of his life, Jeremiah 52 verses 31 to 34. His secretary, according to the Babylonian prism, was one of the Hebrew captives. The 3rd name that refers to Meshach appears as guardian of the women of the palace at the time when the list of representatives of the kingdom was assembled. In the list on that prism, the kings of Palestine and other provinces of Babylon are also included. The convocation referred to by Daniel 3 was accompanied by all kinds of musical instruments, no doubt noisy, so that the entire large body of magistrates would prostrate themselves when they heard the sound. Some critics found that 3 of the instruments mentioned in the story of Daniel are Greek, and inferred that this is another presumable proof that the book of Daniel was written in the 2nd century before Christ under Greek rule. But Greek influence in Mesopotamia could be widely proven as being a fact even before the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The names of musical instruments do not change when you switch to another language. and the fact that only 3 names had been used is clear evidence that the author is not steeped in Greek culture. There's never a shortage of whistleblowers in a crowd when someone commits a foul, especially when there are foreigners holding positions above other nationals. Moved no doubt by envy and the testimony of a foreign religion, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were accused of disloyalty to the king. No doubt remembering the experience he had with them, and knowing their good testimony, the king wanted to give them a second chance. And he warned them that no God had been able to deliver any nation from his hand, and that their God would not be able to deliver them now either. Nevertheless, the 3 brave Hebrews were clear. The God of Israel was the God of heaven, and he had power to deliver them from the hand of the greatest emperor on earth at the time. And if their God did not, they would not prostrate themselves before another God than the God they had served throughout their lives. This testimony proves that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were sustained in the court of Babylon as seeing the invisible, in the words of the Apostle Paul in the Epistle to the Hebrews. All the great men of faith clung to the power of God before seeing his promises fulfilled. This faith cannot be developed overnight, but is cemented over time by a persistent and regular communion with God and His Word. A superheated furnace, probably akin to fire bricks, was enough to burn to death those who threw in the 3 brave Hebrews and the ropes that bound them. But it did not even singe the hair of the captive heroes. And a 4th being appeared among them as ambassador of heaven before the greatest God on earth, who later in the vision of the final judgment in chapter 7 would present himself as the Son of Man before the greatest God in heaven. Son of God, Son of Man, a perfect mediator who fulfills what he promises. Our God is a consuming fire, says Hebrews 12:29. But he can appear in a burning bush without its leaves burning, as Moses saw. The 3 valiant Hebrews probably knew the testimony of Isaiah when he asked, "Who of us can dwell with the consuming fire? Who of us can dwell with the everlasting burning?" He who walks righteously and speaks with sincerity, who refuses gain from extortion, whose hand never takes a bribe, who stops his ears against murderous plots and shuts his eyes tightly against evil. Isaiah 33 verses 14 and 15. To sin, wherever found, our God is a consuming fire. Hebrews 12:29. In all who submit to his power, the Spirit of God will consume sin. But if men cling to sin, they become identified with it. Then the glory of God, which destroys sin, must destroy them. You find this statement of the Spirit of Prophecy in the book Desire of Ages, page 107. God responded to the faithfulness of his heroes in the Babylonian court and delivered them. But often God's response to the cry of his children is silence. All the apostles, except John, were ignominiously killed. Some were crucified. Others died by knife or axe. There were also many Christians given to the beasts in Roman circuses to be devoured by them. How many were also burnt alive in the inquisitorial bonfires of the Roman Church over the centuries for their unwavering fidelity to God? God was silent, as he also kept silent when his Son exclaimed on the cross, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" We must accept those silences of God that sometimes occur in our lives as the best divine response to our cry. Our faith must go beyond present circumstances, for the faithfulness of God's children does not change under any circumstances. God's law is not negotiable. And the day will come when the cry of so many martyrs of Jesus will have full satisfaction. The Lord will bring them back to life and allow them to live eternally in His kingdom. Let us develop that kind of faith by an humble and permanent communion with God. This is my desire with all my heart. Amen.